And welcome back to Ovation Academy, Class with Katie, Episode 3, Introduction to Stage Management. So today we're going to cover just a basic overview of what is a stage manager, what are their responsibilities, and why are they important. And then there's going to be a fun challenge for you all to try your hand at stage management. So first of all, what is a stage manager? Well, a way that I like to describe a stage manager is as the glue that holds an entire production together. Because a stage manager essentially is the person that's responsible for communicating with and organizing everybody from actors to designers to directors and choreographers and all of those different roles, and is responsible for helping them all to work together effectively and to be that sort of linchpin that holds everything together. So some important qualities of a stage manager are, first and foremost, they have to be super calm. Because a stage manager has to be that person that when everything else is crazy and stressful and everyone else is really just anxious and all over the place, the stage manager has to be that calm presence, just sort of grounding everybody and making sure that everybody's okay. Now, the stage manager also has to be incredibly organized. They have to be so on top of everything and have a system in place and know exactly what's going on. A lot of people will say that the stage manager should be the person that knows the show better than anybody else, better than even the director, because they know every single little piece of the show and how they all fit together and have to keep the train on its tracks. Stage manager also has to be very reliable. They have to be early, not just on time to every rehearsal. They have to be that person that people know they can count on to have the answers, or if they don't have the answers, to know that they will get them and that they will be there for them. They have to be a great leader because they're going to be the person that people are looking up to for guidance and for direction. They have to be an effective communicator because with having to communicate with all those different people, directors and designers and actors, they have to be really good at facilitating all of that communication, at writing emails, at talking to people, at communicating things in meetings. And not just at communicating those things, but communicating them in a very professional way. They also have to be very prepared. So a stage manager should always have pencils and erasers and all different kinds of tape and lots of different things so that the goal is when anybody says, hey, does anybody have a, the stage manager has it. And they have to have everything ready before rehearsal so that everybody feels like they are ready to get started. They also have to be a problem solver, both in rehearsals, in shows. If something goes wrong, stage manager has to be ready to jump up and solve that problem in whatever way they can. They have to be really creative. So a stage manager isn't just sort of a person who is on the technical side and pressing buttons and things like that. They're also a part of the artistic team and they're creative. And if the director says, hey, I'm really struggling with how to solve this problem, a stage manager a lot of times is the person that says, okay, let's figure that out. Let's figure out a way to make that scene change smoother, to make it happen faster, or to solve any problem that might come up. Especially in a show, if a problem comes up, they have to be able to solve those problems like that without even thinking about it. Stage manager, lastly, has to be somebody who is nurturing. In a lot of ways, a stage manager kind of serves as like a mom figure in a cast or in a production environment, because they have to be that person whose job it is really to take care of everybody else. And so while it's not a stage manager's job to really be everyone's mom and be tying their shoelaces and that type of thing, it is their job to make sure that everyone is taken care of. And so that is a really important quality for a stage manager, to be that kind and caring presence that everybody knows they can rely upon. So now that we've gone through just some of the qualities that are important for a stage manager to have, we're going to talk about what the responsibilities of a stage manager are in sort of 4 different phases of production. So let's get into that now. All right, so phase 1 is pre-rehearsal. So a stage manager's job starts even way before the rehearsal process begins. Before the rehearsal process starts, they're sending emails, lots and lots of emails. Stage manager's job requires a lot of emails. Again, to all of those people that I went through before. Also, they are at every single production meeting. So those are meetings with the director, the designers, and everybody involved in the creative process of making the show happen. And at all those meetings, they're taking notes and they're answering questions and all of those types of things. A stage manager also creates a whole lot of paperwork. So, a stage manager is going to read the script, first of all just for fun and for enjoyment. And then they're going to start to create all of their paperwork. And this is paperwork that isn't just for the sake of having paperwork, but it's with the goal of making their job easier later on, so they have everything organized. So this is something, an example of what is called a prompt book, or some people call it the stage manager's Bible. So this is an example from the last show I worked on, which was Lizzie the Musical. And it has everything that you need as a stage manager in it. So it's got a cast list, it's got rehearsal schedules, because stage manager is responsible for scheduling rehearsals after talking with the director and then communicating that to everybody, as well as paperwork such as a beat breakdown. So this is something where after going through the entire script, a stage manager will mark out who is on stage for every single page of the script. And this will become very, very helpful later on for doing things like creating costume plots with costume changes and things like that, as well as just being able to track when people are entering or exiting. There's also another sheet you can create, just called an entrance and exit sheet, that just tracks exactly where everybody's going at all the times. So for this show, there were only 4 people in it, but for shows with a lot more people, this document gets a lot more complicated. And then there's also things like a production analysis. So this is a huge document, but it's something that's really, really helpful and something that I always create in shows that I work on. In the challenge later, this won't be part of the basic challenge, but there'll be an example of this in the worksheet if you want to try to create one yourself. And what this is as you go through the script and read through, you write down every single thing that is detailed in the script you might need later. So any notes about the set and what it looks like on any given page, any notes about lighting, any notes about props that you might need, any notes about sound effects, and just any additional things that might include fight choreography or special effects or anything like that. And later, you can use this document, as long and detailed as it is, to make your life a lot easier when you're creating things like a props list and other things like that. So it becomes very, very helpful later on. And all of that paperwork isn't finalized before you start rehearsal, but if you get it all started before rehearsals even start, then as you're in rehearsal, you can continue to update it, and it just makes your life a whole lot easier. And the last thing that stage managers will do before the first rehearsal is something called taping out. So I won't go into detail about this, but essentially what that means is that a lot of times you're not rehearsing in the space where you're going to be performing. Or if you are, there are generally going to be set elements that aren't there on the day of the first rehearsal. So stage managers will take spike tape and tape out sort of where the wings are and where different set elements are, so that actors have some idea of, oh, there's a staircase here that I'm going to need to walk up, and things like that, which makes blocking and staging rehearsals so much easier later on. Phase 2 is during rehearsal. So once rehearsals start, a stage manager's primary job is to keep the rehearsals running on track. So making sure that they start on time, that people take breaks, that everyone gets there on time, calling actors if they're late, and that type of thing. And then also, primarily what they're responsible for during these rehearsals is recording blocking. So blocking is where the actors are moving on stage. And if a stage manager doesn't record this, doesn't write it down, then we might not have that information later, which can be a problem. So the stage manager records it so that the director doesn't have to. And actors should record their own blocking, but a stage manager should always have it just in case actors forget or need a reminder. So this is an example of what it might look like to take down the blocking. There are lots of different ways to do this, but looking at this script that I had from before, the way that I like to do it is have my script page on one side and then have something called a blocking sheet on the other side, where I have, this is a ground plan that shows the set and what it's going to look like, so that I can draw little arrows and things like that, so I can see where the actors are going on stage, as well as lots of numbers, so I can write down specific actions. And then the numbers correspond over here with places in the script. So right at the top of this song, number 1 happens, which is the actress crossing stage right. And so that is just one way to record blocking. And then one more responsibility that the stage manager has, and this is generally also given to an assistant stage manager if there is one, which can be very helpful, and that is to take line notes for actors once they're supposed to be off book, which means once they're supposed to have their lines memorized. And so they will write down any lines that either the actor forgets or that they mess up, and then give them to them at the end of rehearsal so they can fix them for the next time. Phase 3 is the tech rehearsal. Now, technical rehearsals are really when the stage manager starts to take over. Now they're pretty much running the entire rehearsal and making sure that everything is going smoothly. Stage manager a lot of times has something that's called a God mic that they can speak into so everybody can hear them, and it's everybody's responsibility to listen to the stage manager's directions. So if they say, "Hold please," everyone has to stop on stage. And if they don't, then that's a problem. And they might be asking them to hold so that they can fix the lighting or fix a costume or something like that. As well as stage manager might say something like, "All right, everyone, we're going to take a 5-minute break. Let's be back at 8:55. And then everyone should say, "Thank you, 5, because that response lets the stage manager know that they heard the stage manager speaking and that they heard the direction. So in addition to taking over the rehearsal, this is when they will start to worry about something called cues. So cues are things like lighting cues, sound cues, fly cues, which basically just describes anytime the lights change or the sound changes or anything like that, that is something that the stage manager is going to be calling. And so, sometimes this will happen before tech rehearsals or during tech rehearsals, is when they will start to record those cues in their prompt book. So this is an example of a page with cues written along the right-hand side. I like to color code, so I put my standbys in pink and my goes in green. And standby just means that you're giving a warning for the cues that are coming, typically given about 30 seconds before the cue comes. And then the go is when the cue actually happens. So you'll start to write those down and start to practice calling them during the tech rehearsal. And then, so a cue only happens when the stage manager says go. So for example, if I was here, I write it as light cue 228, and I might say something like light 228, go. And then when I say go, that's when the light board operator presses the button. There's going to be an example in the challenge video of how to call cues, and that's actually going to be the challenge for this week, so I'll touch on that in just a little bit. Alright, so now we're in the final phase, phase 4, which is showtime. So during the run of a show, like I talked about before, it's a stage manager's job to call every single cue in the show, which some shows have not that many cues, and some shows have a whole lot of cues. There are lots of different types of cues, so I'll go into more detail about this in the worksheet that's linked down below, but a couple of examples are, there's something called a visual cue, which is called, the stage manager says go, on an action that the actor does. So it might be something like when somebody sits down, you call the cue. Then there's something called a verbal cue, and that is a cue that is said on a specific word within a line that an actor says. So the word might be hello. When an actor says hello, you say go. And then the third one is a timed cue. And this happens a lot of times when you're calling a musical. And so you might be calling it on a specific beat in the music or just at a specific time. And so within the worksheet below, there'll be examples of all of those different types of cues. The other important thing to remember is that when calling cues, you always call it slightly before you actually want the cue to happen, because you have to account for reaction time, for the reaction time of your board operator to actually press the button to make it go. So you'll see that in the example. And so just as a little sort of sidebar, this doesn't really apply to shows that only run for, say, one weekend. But in any shows on Broadway or any touring companies or long-running shows, the job of a stage manager in the long term becomes to actually maintain the artistic integrity of the show, since the director doesn't actually come and watch every single show. So it might be the stage manager's job to give notes to actors if they start to sort of veer off and take their own artistic liberties. It's the stage manager's job to sort of rein them back in. As well as, on long-running shows, it's the stage manager's job to help train any replacements that are brought in. So every time there's a new, say, Elphaba in Wicked, it's the stage manager's job to sit down with them in a rehearsal room and teach them all of the blocking. And they don't get to rehearse with the full cast, except maybe once before they go on stage. So the stage manager's job is really, really important in that kind of situation. All right, so like I said before, this is just a very basic overview of the many different things that a stage manager does. But I hope it gave you sort of a little bit of insight into what I think is one of the least understood roles in theater, because the work that you see them do isn't really very visible. If they do their job right, you don't really know that they're there, but that's the mark of a good stage manager. So your challenge for this week is to do one of the only things that you really can videotape as a stage manager, and that is going to be one of my personal favorite things to do, calling cues, because it's actually a lot of fun. In some ways, you kind of are similar to a conductor in a musical, because even in a straight play, when you're calling cues, everything sort of goes along with the rhythm of the show. And as a stage manager, you have to sort of know that rhythm and breathe with it and call the cues in such a way that makes the show look the best that it can. So there's going to be the activity linked in the worksheet down below. There's going to be an example of myself calling a page of a script, and then a sort of mock example of how you can call your own page of a script. And so I hope you really have fun with that. And then additionally, there's going to be a couple of other resources if you want to explore some of the other things that a stage manager does, such as writing down blocking and creating a production analysis. The things that aren't as exciting to videotape, but are just as equally important, and I think just as cool. So I hope that you enjoyed this overview of stage management and that you enjoy the challenge for this week. We can't wait to see your videos, and come back next week for our last episode of this mini-series. Bye!